Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today we're going to be checking out the Kodiak Trailer Disc Brake Kit, which is going to have a 10-inch rotor and it's going to be designed for 3,500 pound axles. When it comes to trailer braking, I feel like it's one of those things that are oftentimes overlooked, but obviously it's something you want to pay attention to keep you safe and slow everything down. And even, a lot of times some trailers already have the older style drum brakes on it. A lot of times they just get neglected, they don't get adjusted, they're worn out, and they don't do that great of a job anyway compared to a disc brake setup like this. These disc brakes are way more effective, much more simple, and help slow everything down a whole lot better. So with that said, these can make a great upgrade or even in addition to the trailer. Perfect example, our boat trailer here today didn't have any brakes on it at all, nothing. And this is a pretty large fishing boat and they wanted to be able to stop better. And so this should make a huge difference here. So like I said, he just had regular hubs on it, no brakes. And essentially this was pretty easy to change out and not really a whole lot to it there. And so with these brakes on it now, you should see a whole lot better braking power and slowing his whole rig down a lot sooner and safer. Now probably one of the big things a lot of people are wondering, because these kits, they can get confusing at times. There's so many different types of them and every trailer is a little bit different, but these are pretty straightforward. So these are going to work with trailer wheels that are 13 to 15 inches, so the actual rim, and it's going to have a 5 by 4.5 bolt pattern, and it's going to work with the 3,500 pound axles. And you want to make sure that the axle on the end of it here has that 4 bolt flange, and as long as you have that, everything should bolt up and end up working out. There's going to be a few different types of this particular kit, I guess you could say, or this style, and really the differences between them are just the type of materials or the finish. So the one that we have here today, it has this dacrament coating, they call it, on the rotor and the caliper, and it's just a really strong coating that helps protect it against corrosion and whatnot. There's another kit that has a dacrament rotor but a stainless steel caliper, and the other one has all stainless rotor, stainless caliper, and everything else like that. So in most cases, I feel like for the average person, this kit would be more than sufficient. But if you're in extreme conditions or use it all the time, the stainless options might be something worth looking into. With that in mind, chances are pretty good, unless you already have disc brakes on your trailer and you're kind of doing these as a direct replacement, chances are pretty good you're going to need some other parts to kind of complete the package. Like if you're adding them to your trailer like we did today, like I said, we don't have any brakes at all. You're not just going to put these on there and they're going to work. You're going to need other parts to kind of make everything a complete package. And that's going to hold true for those of you that are upgrading from drum brakes as well. You may or may not need some of the stuff, but chances are pretty good, in terms of maybe a rubber line or a different type of actuator, coupler, to get everything set up. So if you're in our situation, we'll just do a quick rundown of the stuff that we used and kind of get a whole package built up for you. That way, you can at least get started and figuring out all the components you're going to need to make this work. So first and foremost, you're going to need bearings and seals, right? So we use the etrailer.com kit, worked out really well, came with the seals, the bearings, and a new cap here, and even new lug nuts as well. So everything fit up really nice, kind of got you the whole kit, and worked out really well. You're gonna also need some bearing grease too if you don't have any at home or don't have the correct type. Depending on what you're doing with your trailer, that's gonna dictate what type of grease you need. Obviously we got a boat, so we use marine grease. And then if you added or put these on from no existing brakes, you're also going to need brake lines. So here's just a piece of it. We use the Kodiak line kit. I actually really like it because it's all rubber hose, and it's actually a pretty nice setup. Makes it a lot easier to run. It's just more manageable. You know, you're not trying to deal with bending metal line and flaring them and everything else. Everything just kind of bolts together with this one. Depending on your trailer, you know, there's a lot of different lengths and, you know, single axle kits, tandem axle kits, so it kind of depends on what you're doing, but regardless of your setup, there's definitely going to be an option for you. And finally, you know, we need to think about the coupler. So, you know, to actually push fluid back to the disc brakes and operate them. So we're using the Demco coupler here today. It has the electric reverse lockout. It's a really nice piece, went together really good. No complaints with it at all. And let's say if you already have drum brakes on your trailer and you already have a setup similar to this, you need to make sure that it is compatible with disc brakes. Since disc brakes use higher operating pressures, you know, you need to make sure that the coupler is capable of that. And obviously you'll have to get some brake fluid to put in there. And something else I want to mention too, if you end up using a rubber line kit like this one here, probably not a bad idea to pick up some clamps like this. That way, you know, under the trailer and where you got to run this and stuff, it can go around there and you can secure it down. So these and some self-tapping screws would probably be a good idea, because when it comes to setting this type of stuff up, it's all the little things that you end up forgetting about and then having to make trips to the store and everything else. So with all that stuff on hand, it should make things go a little bit smoother. Almost forgot to mention too, if you're going to be just adding these and not actually replacing old drum brake setups, you're going to need the mounting hardware that will actually allow you to, you know, bolt up your bracket here to the flange on your axle. So make sure you have that hardware, or else that's not going to happen. But other than that, at the end of the day, you know, if you're trying to increase your braking performance, you know, make things a little more simple. Obviously, the disc brake setup has a lot less moving parts. You don't have to adjust them or anything like that. And looking for a good kit, you know, this is definitely one worth considering. It seems like it's well made, and I really don't have any complaints at all with it, to be honest with you. As far as the installation goes, it's really not too bad. As long as you have all the right parts and pieces, you know, all the little things like we talked about earlier that can slow you down. So, you know, think about everything you need, get all at once, and that will really help, you know, keep things going in the right direction. Speaking of the installation though, we'll go ahead and put ours on together now. Keep in mind though, every trailer might be set up a little bit different, but at least this will get you going. To begin our installation, first need to remove our old setup. So obviously support your trailer, and remove your wheel. You know, every trailer is going to be set up a little bit different. It's just going to depend on what you're doing, whether you're upgrading from a drum brake to disc brake, or whether you don't have any brakes at all. You're going to have to remove this old stuff, but the concept's all kind of the same. So in our case, we just have a standard hub, and what we're going to need to do is first remove this cap here at the very end of it. So with these, what you can do is, you know, spray some penetrating oil in there if you want, and then take a dead blow hammer is what I like to use. You're going to hit it on one side, rotate it, just kind of continuously beat this out. These are pretty tight in there, so it is going to take a little force. Getting pretty close. Try to be a little more gentle now so grease don't come flying everywhere. With that cap out of the way, I just took a rag and wiped all this grease that was piled up in here. And then we're going to have a cotter pin we need to pull out. So we'll straighten this one out. I find it easiest just to do it with a pair of needle nose pliers. Our trailer's pretty new, so I think we're gonna reuse this cotter pin if you can. If yours is old or worn out or anything like that, you can always replace it. But we're gonna try to save ours. So if you're having a hard time getting it out, which a lot of times this will be the case, something you can do is try to get it as straight as you can, and then you can kind of take your pliers, kind of grip the head of it there, and take your hammer, start to work it out that way. So set this off to the side, and we're going to have this cap. This piece just pops off, and then we're going to have a nut that we need to remove. Let me clean this up a little. So there's a nut, and you should be able to unscrew this by hand. If not, for whatever reason, if it was super tight, take a pair of channel locks or something and break it loose. But ours is coming off pretty easy. It's really just the grease. It's so slippery, it's hard to kind of get a hold of. And you want to hold on to all this stuff too. What we'll do is, the parts that we just took off, we'll just kind of give them a good wipe down, and maybe we can use them for later. And then you can pull out on this. You're gonna have a washer here. We'll hold on to that. And we should be able to remove our whole hub by just pulling it off. Now that we have our hub and everything off, I cleaned up the spindle real good. Just wiped it down and inspected it. You know, you want to check for cracks, any deep gouges or anything like that. You know, ours looks really good, so nothing to worry about. Now we can take our bracket and mount this up to the flange there on our axle tube. So the brackets, they will be stamped, or this one is stamped outside, so obviously you want that facing us. And depending on what side of the trailer you're on, you want to position this in a certain way. So on the right side of the trailer, or the passenger side if you will, you want the brake caliper to be in the 9 o'clock position, so it'd be sitting back here. And on the left side or driver's side of your trailer, you'd want it to be, I guess it would be in the 3 o'clock position. So you want them towards the back of the trailer. All right. Now, since our axle didn't have anything mounted to it, already, you know, mounted up to it like a drum brake, for example, we don't have any hardware. This kit doesn't come with it, so we're gonna grab a hardware kit, and that will allow us to properly bolt this up. So I grabbed our hardware kit. It's just a bolt, a split lock washer, and a nut. And you're gonna need 8 of each of these total if you're doing a single axle. Obviously, if you're doing a tandem axle, you're gonna need double that. But we're only doing a single, so what we'll do is put this in place. We'll take our bolt, run that through, our split lock washer on the back, followed by our hex nut, and I'm just going to use that same combination to get the rest of them going here. Once your bolts are all put in place, though, you want to make sure to come back and properly torque them down using a torque wrench. Now we can prepare our hub and rotor assembly. That way we can get ready to actually put it on our spindle. And so what we want to do is get a bearing and a seal in the back of it. Now this kit doesn't come with bearings and seals, but today we're going to be installing all new stuff, and we're going to be using the etrailer.com kit. To pack the bearing, you want to use the appropriate type of grease. So with this being a boat trailer, we're using marine type grease. And actually what I'm gonna do is just put a little bit inside of here first. just smear some around. And there's the light coating. Kind of get things going here. And then I'm going to pump quite a bit into my hand here, and once I have a handful, then we can start to pack it into the bearing. So get a good amount of grease in your hand, and you know, there are tools available, bearing packers and whatnot. You know, I'm just showing you the way you can do this with no tools, you know, so you don't have to go out and buy something special. But what you need to do is take your bearing, and if you look at it, where you kind of see the rollers, that little gap there, we want to take grease and push it down. That way that grease will get forced into them rollers and start to come out around the edges there. All right, so what you can do, take a big blob of grease and just start to pack it in there. You can push down pretty hard. See, we might be able to get a little bit shown on camera. I don't know if you can see that or not, where the rollers are dry and then I'm pushing it, you get that grease coming through there. And don't be shy with this stuff. You want to make sure these are properly lubricated. So I'm just going to work my way around, get that grease in there really well until it's essentially just spilling out of the crack there. So once we have our bearing completely packed, you know, we're gonna drop that in like that. Make sure it sits down in there good. And while your hands are all dirty, if you want to grab the front bearing and do the same thing to it, that way we can have that ready and set off to the side whenever the time is right. So once that bearing's dropped on in there, I like to wipe away a lot of the extra grease that came up along on the side there. I like to leave a thin layer just to help lubricate the seal when it goes in. And same thing with the seal. I just wipe a very thin layer around it just to help drive it in and go from there. So with these seals, again, there's tools you can use, seal driver kits and stuff that you can use. You know, a lot of people aren't going to have that type of thing though, so I'm gonna do it the old-fashioned way. And honestly, I kind of like this way better, especially with the seal like this. You know, that's a pretty nice one, so it can handle this a little bit better. But I like to try to get it started, you know, get it lined up straight as best I can, and then just take a block of wood. All right, put that on there and take a dead blow hammer, start to lightly tap. When we're tapping this down, 1 or 2 taps at a time, take the block of wood off and just make sure that this is driving in flush. You know what I mean? So this looks pretty good. If, say, one side's up a little higher, you know, just tap over more to that side. So this one's looking pretty good, actually. Examine it. We just want to hit this down flush with the surface of the hub there. A lot of times you'll have to end up turning it. Turn the board here. Just gonna work it around a few times, and it doesn't take a ton of force either. You don't have to, you know, give this your all here when you're tapping this in. But, you know, make sure that the seal doesn't fold over on itself or get pinched up or look out of place or anything. Like I said, these ones are pretty sturdy pieces, so we get this drove down, it stops, it looks really good, and now we can work on the front. I flipped our assembly over and packed the smaller bearing just like we did the larger one. You know, same way, this will go in this side. We're not going to put it in just yet, but we want to have it ready. And then I did put some grease just like the backside, light coating around our bearing race. And if you don't have quick lube spindles on the end of your spindle on your axle, if there's a grease fitting, you don't really need to worry about putting more grease inside of here, because once you put everything on, we'll fill it full of grease that way. If you don't have that grease fitting there, you can take more grease, put it inside of here. That way everything stays properly lubricated. But with that said, we can grab all the stuff and get it put on our axle spindle. We'll take this, again, I put a light coating of grease on the spindle, and we'll just very carefully slide that into place straight as we can. We'll take our front bearing, push that into place. While we're holding this up here, take our washer, and I like to just put a thin layer of grease and all this stuff. That'll slide on. We can take our nut. I'm gonna run this all the way down by hand until it gets tight. And then just to make sure that this is fully seated on there, what I like to do is take a pair of channel locks and tighten it down. That way we know this is pushed all the way on there. Then I'll break it loose, and I'll back it off, and then literally just run it down by hand until it stops. And that'll set on preload. We can take our retainer here, put that into position. You gotta line up the little keyways there so you can get the cotter pin back in. Cotter pin, kind of do the same thing actually to get it in. If it's fighting you a little bit. Run it up through there. And then bend the ends down. So now what we can lubricate everything with our quick fitting there. Take our grease gun, and we're just gonna work grease into it until eventually it'll take quite a bit since we didn't put really any in. But what we're looking for is just like a rounder washer and everything, just to see grease start to kind of pump out of there. So keep working it in until I see that, and once we see that, we know we're in good shape. Looks like I'm getting a little bit of grease coming out now. Just kind of starting to punch out from there, so we know we're in good shape. We'll pull that off, and then we can get our cap on. For our cap, this will simply just pop on. These are kind of a pain sometimes to get going, to be honest with you. So I put a little bit of lubricant around the edge there, hold it in place, take a dead blow hammer, try to get it started. Like I said, sometimes they're kind of tough to get going, so just take your time with it. Once I have it somewhat going, I'll do that same trick with our 2x4 here. You just want to get it until it is fully seated. So with this all squared away now, we can get our caliper in place. So pretty straightforward. These holes in it will line up with the holes in our bracket. And so we're just gonna slide this on. So our holes, get the this lined up here. And then you're gonna take those bolts, and I like to get both of them started kind of hand tight. And then once that happens, we'll be able to come back and snug them down. Once the caliper's secured, then take our brake line and get that going into the fitting there. With these being brass, kind of a softer metal. I like to get them started as much as I can by hand, and then come back with a line wrench, tighten them down. This line wrench just kind of wraps around the fitting better. That way you don't round it off. A regular wrench will work. Just be careful. Make sure you don't strip the fitting out. So now with this side all set up and done, you can simply repeat this same process over on the other side to get that one on. And obviously if you got a tandem axle set up, get all of them done. And once they're all in place and hooked up, then we can start to focus on bleeding our brake system. That way we get all the air out of the lines. To bleed your trailer's brakes, you're going to take the appropriate brake fluid, fill it up in the reservoir up here, and then there's a cover ours has that you can just pop off. And what I'm going to do is just take a extension and a socket and put it over this. I'm not going to turn the bolt or anything. You're just going to push in slowly and out slowly, kind of let it come back. Do that several times. You'll feel it get hard, you know, and you want to check every now and again in your reservoir to make sure. You don't want to let this run dry, or else you're going to suck more air into it. So, you know, if you got to top it off, then do that, and do this several times. And once we feel, you know, like fluid's actually going into the lines and we got good resistance, we're going to go to the back and open up our bleeder screws to let all the air out. So when you're getting the air out of the lines, you're going to need 2 people to do this, right? So one person will be up here, and what they'll do is they'll push this in, you know, all the way in and hold it there. And while they're holding it, you can open up the bleeder screw, let the air out. You know, some fluid will come out with it too, usually. And, you know, for a couple seconds, then tighten the screw back down, tighten the bleeder screw back down. And then the person up here will let this back out and then continue to pump it several times. And you do that over and over again until you, you know, get all the air out of lines. And I want to say, if you have a tandem axle trailer, you want to make sure to start with the brakes in the back first, so furthest away from this, and then work your way up. So what you're going to do, you don't have to take a clear hose and put it over this, but I like to. You can kind of see the fluid and see the air a little bit better. But I'm going to just push it over the top. I'm going to take a wrench, and I'm going to have my buddy up front there hold it down, holding. So while he's holding it, you're going to crack this open a little bit. And just like I thought with this one, nothing but air came out. So we'll pump it up again, and just continue to do that over and over until we have a steady stream of fluid coming out. We don't want to see we don't really want to see it spitting out, or, you know, air bubbles in it or anything like that. Hold it. And there I go and pump. So we're cracking this open. We're getting somewhat close. You see the stream of fluid and then a couple little air pockets coming out of there. If we see any little air pockets like that at all, we know we need to continue to keep bleeding. All right, go ahead. We'll crack this open. Got that solid stream of brake fluid. So I think we're in pretty good shape. But just for good measure, I like to do this a few more times, you know, kind of get it consistent to where we get steady, you know, 4 or 5 times of just that good fluid coming out. And once that's complete, you know, obviously you do the rest of them and you're good to go. Once you have your system bled and it bled properly, obviously everything should be sealed up. But when you're dealing with brakes, it's, you know, it's always good to be more safe than sorry. So not a bad idea to come back, look at all your connections that you made with your brake lines and everything else, and just take a quick peek at them, make sure they're dry and not leaking, just to be on the safe side. And last but not least, once you're all wrapped up, obviously put your tires back on and snug up the nuts, and you want to torque these down to the proper amount. And when you do that, you want to torque them in a star pattern. That way they will kind of push the wheel on flat and keep it true. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Kodiak disc brake kit with the 10-inch rotor, and which is designed for the 3,500 pound axles.